Hi, Terry here. I want to introduce you to my nephew, Stephen Robert Fortunato, named for both his grandfathers, Stephen Fortunato and Robert J. Crawford. Stephen joined the Army after high school. When he was a senior in high school, he watched, devastated, when the towers fell in New York City in 2001. He was very motivated by that to stand up as an American and defend his country's right to freedom, justice, life, liberty. And so he joined the Army after high school. His first tour of duty after basic training was in Korea. And there might have been 2 tours in Korea, I'm not sure. He worked patrolling the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. You know, that war was never declared over. That war was never declared won or lost. There's a headstone for that war in the cemetery in Andover, Mass. And the top half of the headstone is rough stone, and the bottom half of the headstone is smooth marble. It's very impressive when you see it and you realize that those differences are still not settled. So he was there for at least a year, I think. And then he came back to the States, and he was stationed, I think, at Fort Hood in Texas, where he was to be acclimated to get used to the weather, the dry heat. And once acclimated, he and his troop were sent to Afghanistan. And he did about a year or so before he had an R&R, rest and relaxation, whatever that stands for. And he came home, and he was married and is a lovely young wife. And he went right back after the marriage. And then they settled in Texas temporarily. And then Stephen was deployed again after the acclimation in the Texas weather to Afghanistan, where he served another round, and he came home again for R&R just in time for his mother's retirement. So there was a good family party for that, and people got to see him and talk with him. And then he went back to Afghanistan, and the first day that he got back, he was very tired from the long travels, and his mates had found a replacement to go out on their tour that day. And he said, "No, I will go with you, I'm fine." And he did go with them. There were 4 of them. Stephen was 25, and his mates were, I think, 21, 19, and 18. They went out on their tour, and their tour was to guarantee safe passage of the citizens of the village where they were stationed to the polling places where the Afghans were going to be able to vote for their first time since the domination of the Taliban. The Taliban had moved on to other places, and Afghan was relatively a free country then. And the army, the soldiers, they all felt good about that. And they wanted to keep them safe while they were voting. Unfortunately, part of their routine was also checking the roads to make sure that they could have safe passage. And their Humvee drove over or hit an IED, an improvised explosive device, which blew the vehicle up. Stephen, being a gunner, a marksman, was on the top of the vehicle in the gunner's nest, and his body was ejected. Of the 3 inside the Humvee, 2 of them died in the explosion, and the third one was badly injured, which is why I give to the wounded warriors each month. When Stephen was in Korea, he said to his mother, "If anything happens to me, I want you to give to the USO." He was very aware of his vulnerability, which is kind of amazing for a young man in his early 20s. But he was, and he wanted his mother to know what she should support if something happened to him. He thought the USO was wonderful, providing free entertainment to the soldiers. I started to support the USO, but then I had to make a choice. Financially, I had to make a choice. And I chose to give to the Wounded Warriors in honor of Stephen's mate, who I hope benefits from the Wounded Warriors Project, because I know he had some serious injuries to deal with. The day of Stephen's funeral, his casket was placed on a white caisson, and it was drawn by 2 white field horses from a neighborhood farm. And all of the school children were released from their classrooms at the elementary school that was on the route between the wake and the burial. And they all were standing outside the flag, waving little flags and holding their little hands over their hearts. And their teachers were standing there with them. And it was a very emotional setting for all of us. When we got to the gravesite after the ceremony, I held Rob's hand, my son's hand, and I asked him to please, please don't join the military. He was 4 years younger. He was out of high school at this point and was in college. And I wanted him to know that staying here stateside, as Stephen would have said, staying here stateside offered plenty of opportunities to help people with Rob's skills. Rob had been a junior firefighter when he was in junior high and high school. And he did become a firefighter paramedic, stayed here in the United States. And I think Stephen's 2 brothers also decided at or after that funeral that they would stay here stateside too, because they saw what Stephen's death did to his mother, to their mother. And Rob saw what it did to me and to his father. Every May, we have a lot of patriotic celebrations, May and June and July, not the least of which is Memorial Day, when we honor all of the fallen heroes. That's coming up at the end of the month. But yesterday, Betty and I went into Boston for a celebration for the fallen heroes. It's usually held on Boston Common, and on Boston Common they plant thousands of American flags upright in the ground, one flag representing one lost soldier, sailor, in a war defending the United States and defending freedom and defending justice, liberty. At Stephen's funeral, the general who spoke to the group, giving a eulogy, said, "Every time you see an American flag, you see Stephen and his mates. Every American flag holds a bit of the soul of every soldier who died for their country." And I always think of that. So Betty and I were at the cemetery, at the ceremony yesterday, but it wasn't on the Common. It was held at the State House in the Great Hall of Flags. And Betty read Stephen's name and probably half a dozen others. Many families couldn't get there yesterday because of the northeaster that we were having. We had a lot of rain. No snow. Sometimes we have snow in May. Not this year. No snow, but a lot of rain. And Biddy and I got home earlier because the ceremony was held earlier, because it was at the State House. And it was a very nice time. All of the politicians were not there. They usually are. Usually the governor and the lieutenant governor and sometimes the reps and the senators from the State House come. They'll all be on vacation next week in Washington, so I don't think they could have come to this. I don't think I've ever seen a federal senator or representative at them. But every year they have this ceremony, and it's an honor to be there and to represent Steve and his mates and the many other Americans who do go and fight and protect our liberties. So I hope you keep them all in your mind. I'm going to tell you there are 37,000 flags on the Boston Common this weekend. They represent all of the lost heroes from the American Revolution, the French Indian War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, the World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, Vietnam, and Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. 37,000 men and women from Massachusetts who have been lost in a military battle. Please think of them this week. Please think of them all the time. And if you can give to the Wounded Warriors Project, I know they would appreciate it. And if you want to give to the USO to help those who are still there serving somewhere, do that also. I'm going to go now. Thanks for listening. Thinking of Stephen. Bye-bye.